Being in Miami really brought right to the forefront of all the things that I cared about and thought mattered in the world and needed to be worked on. And then it turned out a lot of them also correlated and tied back to climate change, which meant to me as an entrepreneur an opportunity to make money as well while doing good.
Stonely, it's so good to see you. Welcome to Opportunity Miami.
Matt, it's wonderful to see you as well. Always a pleasure. And it's certainly been too long. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to chat with you and to be here on Opportunity Miami.
I was thinking, and before we got started, I was reflecting that I think we go back over 10 years. And so to, of course, here in Miami, and we'll talk all about that. But want to start with a serious question. And that's that you're betting your professional life, your professional future on investing in companies combating climate change. Why?
Yeah, I think there's two parts of that question. One is why am I betting my career on investing in companies? And then secondly, why climate change? So as you know, I was an entrepreneur for most of my adult life. And when we met, I had sold my last company. You convinced me to come down to Miami and spend some time hanging out with other founders and helping build the tech ecosystem there. That's really where I fell in love with the idea of helping other founders and working with other entrepreneurs and building up their companies. And so, one part of that answer is there's no other way I'd rather spend my time than helping people build, their visions and their ideas for improving the world. I'd say also from a pragmatic perspective, I think when you have the ability to leverage risk into your career, you should take it. Certainly could find an easy path earning, a predictably set, nice amount of money. But I instead chose to invest and put all of my money into other people's ideas and into building this platform so that the outcomes, if successful, could be significantly much more exciting. And the progress has been great. And then the second part of your question, as far as why climate, again, being in Miami really brought right to the forefront of all the things that I cared about and thought mattered in the world and needed to be worked on. Seeing the forefront of sea level rise and heat increase, and being in Miami just brought all that really close to home. And then it turned out a lot of them also correlated and tied back to climate change, which was this 40, 50, 100-year problem that there were real opportunities to work on it today while everyone else was kind of still ignoring it, which meant to me as an entrepreneur an opportunity to make money as well while doing good.
So moved to San Francisco and one thing led to another and launched with Shaun Third Sphere. Tell us what Third Sphere is.
So Third Sphere is a venture and broader finance platform that we actually started as Urban Us in Miami, out of the Lab Miami. Sure. And we first started off by investing and advising really early companies, writing small checks, right? We raised money from investors. We told them, we don't know what we're going to do with your money, but we want to work on climate and we want to work with founders. We ended up advising some companies, but mostly just gave them the money. And that ultimately rolled into this series of venture funds. And as we were building the venture fund, we realized there was an opportunity to also deploy private credit, private debt strategies into early climate companies. And so now it's a broader platform. Really, at the end of the day, our business is finding the most promising companies and potential solutions and helping them come to market, grow, and ideally to an exit that's sustainable and returns capital to our LPs. That's basically my day-to-day. And Third Sphere was the evolution of Urban Us in that when we started, it was this how do we talk about climate without saying climate? And again, the inspiration from Miami was you can work on a lot of urban challenges that actually do tie back to climate, and you can have this urban city conversation. And ultimately, though, we realized we had covered a lot of territory about 6-7 years in on the urban sustainability and resilience front. And we evolved to expand to a more broader climate strategy. And therefore, the brand definition expanded as well. And that's why we're Third Sphere today.
So give us a sense about sort of how big is the fund or funds and how many companies that you're currently invested in?
So we have a little over 100 million in assets under management today. That's not including valuation increases. And we've deployed, I would say, probably 60 of that so far into a little over 110 companies. The strategy is to invest, a 150, 250 to 750K initial investment in the beginnings of a company, and then as the company progresses, out of a portfolio, as the most promising companies progress, we double down with larger and larger follow-on investments while doing our part to add value and continue to help the company progress. And sometimes that just means getting out of the way. But the most important thing, of course, is picking the right teams to work with and the right things to work on.
Talk with us about some of the types of companies that that you're investing in, and what are the areas sort of within the climate space that excite you the most?
We've been accused of two things. One, of being the sort of pragmatic and practical VC, in that we are looking for things that are that have moonshot qualities but are not quite moonshots. Like, we're not taking science risk. But at the same time, we are looking for new ways to deploy technology into the world that haven't been thought of yet. And because we're investing in climate, a lot of the things that we get excited about happen to also be hardware, which thankfully is something we have as a background as company builders. It's something we've gotten comfortable with as investors over the last 10 years and built a lot of muscle around being able to do. That's one. We do, like, probably 70% of our portfolio is hardware, but we believe that any climate fund that's responsibly investing in climate will have 50+% hardware exposure, whether they want it or not, if you really are going to work on climate. Now, the other thing we've been accused of is not being an actual climate fund. And that's because not every one of our investments look like a climate investment. And so a number of companies that have made it to Miami as either a base or a market are good examples of, frankly, companies that if you look at it at first glance, you wouldn't think climate, but when you go a few layers in on the nuance, then you can connect the dots. One being KiwiBot, which deployed electric delivery robots onto Miami campuses, lower emission transportation and logistics. Another being One Roof, which has a few buildings under management and building communities that are resilient because of that social fabric. Again, not the default thinking when most people are talking about carbon capture. But at the end of the day, one of the things that we realized, thanks to starting off in Miami, is that it's not climate change. We're dealing with climate changed. It's already a reality.
Right, it's done.
And so what are the things that have to change along with climate? And one of those is we need more social fabric with people closest to us. In a disaster, communities that are more tethered together are more likely to have a higher sort of success rate of making it through the disaster and through the challenge. And again, we have a number of resilience-related strategies that are about that sort of preventative and recovery effort. And we have some electric transportation fleets that are deployed in Miami, like Circuit, which provides a free last mile bus routes throughout South Florida.
Electric bus, right?
Electric buses, yeah.
Yeah.
I go on and on. I mean, as far as what excites us the most, generally you'll see a pattern in our portfolio of stuff that is traditionally large industrial processes that someone has figured out how to shrink and modularize and distribute, whether that's batteries, whether it's energy generation, whether it's steel manufacturing. So that's one area that particularly excites us, is take 10x reduction of cost and creating resilience and the ability to go into new places because of the modular nature of the solution. The other thing that we love is repurposing existing infrastructure. We have a company that's turned retired oil wells into sustainable batteries.
Oh, wow.
Using gravity and mechanical storage. So again, I would say the third thing that we've been accused of at the same time is also being sci-fi investors. Like, we invest at that nexus of things you wouldn't really imagine, and you don't quite know if it's sci-fi or not until you see the thing and you realize it's not. It just looks like science risk. It's actually just manufacturing and distribution risk, but it's a very sort of exciting value proposition if they can get those things right. And that applies also to a lot of the software stuff we've invested in.
So for people new to the space, our entire economy has to transition to one that ultimately is net zero, ultimately. That includes how we get around, how we manufacture things, how we produce food, how we cool and heat the places we live and work, where we get our power from. And essentially, what you're doing is betting on the companies that are driving that transition and finding those winners of the bunch. Is that a fair way to be thinking about this?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and one step further is not just like the need to get to these goals, it's the reality of having to adapt again to a changed climate, having to adapt to whether that directly impacts your business or your lifestyle, and having to find new solutions, whether it's more heat, so you need better cooling, or whether it's, flood exposure to your infrastructure, et cetera. The reality is we all have to adapt and adjust. And that motivates also prevention, right? Maybe a little too late in some fronts, but better late than never. And, one of the things going into, again, your first question, why work on climate? It was this foresight. I will give a little bit of credit to seeing that everything will ultimately become impacted by climate, and will ultimately be like investment decisions, purchase decisions will all ultimately be influenced by climate factors over the next coming decades. So why not get ahead of that? Why not get in front of that? And yes, the job to be done for us is identifying the key pieces of tech and key teams that are going to be a part of the solution set that we can tap into. Policy is great. We've had policy, science research. Scientists have known about climate change for almost 100 years now. We were lacking entrepreneurs and the funding for those early entrepreneurs to get those things off the shelf and out into the world to help actually start working on solving climate.
I mean, it's important, I guess, too, that while you think that this is critically important, this shift, but also built within this in so many ways is that this is really sort of the business opportunity of our lifetime about investing in the companies driving this transition.
I would say so. Another co-investor today got a notice that we were featured in Fortune as one of the top climate investors, and I read the article. I skipped my part because I hate hearing myself. I probably won't watch this interview. I hate reading what I wrote, or what people write about me. But I love seeing what my peers are thinking. Josh from Congruent said it in a way that I love to say, which is, again, everything will become climate, but not just that. The climate will be a annoyingly persistent thing that you won't be able to ignore, right? And so when you're talking about technology investing, and then the parallel that Josh painted was the internet, right? It's like After a while, first there were internet funds, and then everything was internet, right? And that was a sort of phenomena that persisted, but it sort of blended in the background. Climate, I think, is going to have a similar effect. First, there are climate funds. Then you realize everything has to have a climate factor in the consideration set when you're thinking of investing. And then ultimately, maybe it just becomes part of just the normal default thinking, and you don't even distinguish it. But I think it'll take a while because the disruptions will be so dramatic and sharp that, the typical human behavior of sort of adjusting and normalizing just won't work, and it won't be easy to sort of forget. I think one year it was one fire, the next year it was 10 fires, and then it's the extreme heat, and then the next year it's the extreme, wetness. And so it's all these different left, right punches hitting us in different places. And so, it just becomes more and more an inignorable thing, but also hard to just sort of normalize and accept that, climate has changed, because it's currently still changing, and not for the better for us. We have to adapt. We also have to do whatever we can to prevent. And, and it's not just like we have to do it because it's good, also because our society is built around a very stable climate that, we may not have the luxury, and we have to embrace and accept the fact that we're part of the reason that stable period has ended or is ending. And there may be some things we could still do to curtail and to turn the ship. So the onus is on us to try, or accept that, the multi-trillion-dollar economy, the billions of people on this planet, like all of that could dramatically change if we just sit around and do nothing. It's not just a matter of quietly adapting. We have to proactively adapt. We have to prevent what we can. And that's going to be a huge shift in trillions of dollars of industry.
It's so cool listening to you, Stonely, is, said at the outset, we go back more than a decade, knowing each other here in Miami. When we first met when you were up in Fort Lauderdale, and you just sold your company then and came down to Wynwood at the lab. But I share all that because I feel like listening to you right now, you found your life's work. I mean, this is what you're going to spend your life working on.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, again, the two things that became clear to me that I needed to figure out after 10 years of building random companies was one, I needed more leverage. I spent 10 years building companies with my own money, boom and bust. It wasn't until after that exit that I realized I could have been using other people's money and leveraging the exit to even bigger numbers. So that's one. And then two, I needed to care about what I was working on, whether I had a successful exit or a not successful outcome in my earlier companies. It all felt kind of empty because I didn't know why I was working on it beyond just chasing profit, chasing revenue. Now I know why I'm waking up and working on something, no matter how hard it is, no matter how good things are going or how bad things are going, and you just really can't buy that.
So let's talk ecosystems. And as we think about this climate tech future and where these climate tech companies of the future are going to be built, I guess a two-part question. One, are there places that have begun to distinguish themselves as places that are sort of hubs for new climate tech companies? And then two, the question I want to get to is what can places that aspire to that, and ecosystem building well, you are pivotal and fundamental to the growth of the Miami tech ecosystem. What are those things that those places can be doing? But we'll start with the first one. Are there places that have really distinguished themselves as climate tech hubs? Or are you finding yourself investing in companies really all over the world?
I mean, we are investing in companies all over the world because, again, climate touches so many things. It's not always like blaringly just climate that makes something an interesting climate investment. And there are hubs for various sectors. Like, we invested in a few construction related companies out of Israel, for example. We've invested across the spectrum in Europe. We've even done a few investments in Africa. But I would say the majority, 80% plus of our portfolio are North America, are US. And the concentration based on just a natural sort of distribution set of where companies are being born is San Francisco and New York. In New York, policy has shaped and signaled customer spend. So you have things like Local Law 97 that's signaling that businesses and buildings need to adapt the way they operate to lower their emissions. And that has galvanized a spend around retrofitting and building buildings for more sustainable footprints that has motivated solution providers like entrepreneurs to show up with their ideas, with their solutions, and now they have customers ready to buy versus spend money on fees and fines. And New York in general has just done a great job in signaling like these are the priorities of New York. We have all these buildings, we're right next to the water. We really need entrepreneurs working on these things. I mean, Miami started in a similar fashion. New York really took it an extra number of hundreds of miles in like just running with that ball in like supporting hubs, supporting challenges, really signaling again via policy. Now, California, of course, has a very powerful role that it plays in signaling via policy for things like sustainability in buildings and vehicles, et cetera, emissions. It's always been a leader in that way because just the sheer size of the economy of California. San Francisco in particular is interesting because what you have is, of course, the concentration of risk capital. But it's not just a matter of risk capital that makes climate tech successful here or prominent here. It's also where the capital is coming from. So what happened right in San Francisco is that the LPs, the limited partners that invest in funds, started demanding mandates around climate investing. They have this same foresight. They wanted exposure to both the adaptation and the mitigation strategies that climate requires. They have assets exposed to the climate disaster, so they wanted upside, and so they are asking their GPs, the investors that run these funds, to give them climate strategies, and that's what spurred this pangent explosion of climate funds in the Bay Area, but really everywhere, right? LPs distribute their capital now more universally as well. It's not all VCs aren't just in the Bay Area anymore. A number of them have moved to Miami, but I think what will inspire and instill more growth of climate investing in South Florida is LP dollars that are asking for these mandates, that believe in the upside and are saying you're at least going to have some part of your strategy, or we're looking for funds that have an entire strategy around climate because it's happening here, and the opportunity to lose, and if we do nothing, lose money, and if we do something, maybe make a lot of money, is also here. And it aligns with, generally these LPs are pension funds, et cetera. It aligns with improving the quality of life of our stakeholders. So it makes all the sense in the world for Miami to be a nexus of those two powers, legislation, policy that's protective and encouraging of a better, symbiosis with the planet and adapting to the changing climate, but also capital motivating the talent to actually work on these things.
What is the world that you hope that investing in climate tech companies around the world, across the US and New York, SF, here in Miami too, that you hope to see?
It's definitely going to be a significantly different world, both from the planetary side and the tech side. On the planetary side, either we've figured a lot out and we now live a much more symbiotic relationship with the planet, and it's a wonderful world to live in, as it should be, or at least we found our place in it that makes it wonderful for us. It'll always be a wonderful world. It's just whether or not there'll be a place in it for us. Now, the other side of that coin is maybe we haven't. And, I love sailing. I want to teach my son to sail. I loved, the archipelagos that Miamians love to do, where you got to get on the water with a bunch of boats. But I don't want to have to do that just to go to the grocery store, right? And I don't want, health issues that come from literally just being born and being out in the world because it's so hot. It could be a really tough to live in world, which, who knows how we get to our base priorities of continuing to expand society and tech progress when we're dealing with just back to the basics of survival and hierarchy of needs. Like, we have to curtail getting back to those base things because it delays the further advancement, of our species and society. And again, this ultimate goal of taking the good we've done here and expanding it. So I'm hoping for the former, where we've done a really great job. We love what we've done here. We want to expand. We want to IPO to the rest of the universe with the wonderful thing we've done here. The other thing that also gives me hope, though, is that technology is continuing to rapidly accelerate. There's a new energy around breakthroughs and bringing breakthroughs to market, whether that's generative AI, whether it's super connectivity. Like, I think society has never been geekier, and the solutions really are rapidly progressing and compiling on each other. In 10, 20, 30 years, we won't even recognize this world. It's crazy to think about the rapid rate of expansion of tech today. Some days I'm an optimist, and some days it's not so easy to be optimistic. But that's normal in life, whether you're working on climate or anything, right? So my work does not depend on how optimistic I'm feeling. The concept that I like to remind myself is, like, I'm a baby turtleist, right? You're on the seashore and there's a baby turtle trying to crawl back to the ocean amongst many. And you pick one up and you take it to the ocean, and someone, this is an adage, I'm not making this up, someone says, well, why bother with one baby turtle when there's so many to pick up? Like, well, at least I can do this one thing and it'll matter to this turtle. And so when I wake up every day, it's at least I can work on this one piece to move the needle forward. And it matters to this one piece, and it matters to myself that I got to work on it. We'll see where we end up. Obviously, there's hope. I definitely have hope. That's the only reason to work on anything. But even a stock trader has hope that they're going to make a ton of money today. And you kind of have to have that sort of foolish belief that it can work out. But really, it's all about doing the work and just getting up, doing one more thing that day. And that's what motivates me.
Stonely, it is so great to see you. Always so much fun to talk. Too short. But thank you for this time today. This has just been awesome.